The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
So one superstar returns and one is going to not.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast.
So this is kind of what we've been waiting for, right? To see the effects that it will have on Joel Embiid after the altercation in the locker room. So right now, the Philadelphia 76ers, he has been suspended for 3 games in Joel Embiid. Keith, we've talked about this a little bit. There's no timetable on his return in terms of injury. So now Nick Nurse doesn't have to answer the injury question anymore. So that means at least maybe one NBA investigation will stop for the time being.
Yeah, it will stop for the time being. But now it's going to be kind of like, well, coach, how's Joel feeling? Does he feel good enough to serve a suspension yet? You know what I mean? It's crazy. Like, I mean, here's the thing. We knew it was going to happen. But at the same time, the Sixers did expect Joel to play on this trip, and it could have been as early as tomorrow. So, you know, I feel like if I'm the 76ers, I really want to get this thing started now. Like, okay, Joel Embiid is going to be suspended Wednesday, Friday, and then Sunday. And then we get him back for the Knicks game. Because, here's the deal. I don't know if they could beat the Knicks without Joel Embiid right now. So if I'm the Sixers, I'll just basically get it over with and have them ramp up whatever you have to do. But basically, I'm letting them serve the suspension as soon as possible.
Yeah, you look at it too, and it says, okay, well, you could eventually have him back for the Knicks, right? Because you look at the Clippers, the Lakers, and then you go on and see the Hornets before New York. But then it brings in the question, is that going to be a game that you want to see Joel Embiid in going against Karl Anthony Towns in his first game back? Not really, but they're not going to win without Joel Embiid. I mean, Cat is just going to have a field day. You know, Gershon played really good last night, and I loved it, but he's not defending Cat, and Andre Drummond's probably going to get into some foul trouble. So Joel Embiid, I definitely think is the only way that they can win those games. But right now, when you look at it, do you feel like Nick Nurse is going to say, all right, well, bringing him back against the Knicks is just going to be way too risky, and, maybe he isn't 100%, or if he is, that's not the game you want to ramp him back up? Or is it, you know what, we need to win some basketball games, and this is the time to show him off? And the centers in the Eastern Conference, this is what we've all been waiting for, to see this matchup come up soon.
I think it's the latter. I think you have no other option, right? I feel like, Joel, unfortunately for him, and the crazy part, it is a back-to-back, right? So
yeah,
he's probably going to miss one. He's going to miss one of the two. So it's up to them, but I feel like you just don't have a choice. You don't. You basically forfeited that when you got suspended. Right about now, we're looking at the 76ers. They're 1-5. They have the second worst record in the Eastern Conference. They showed some improvement yesterday, but at the same time, you look at it, you need him to play. You really do. Now, again, they're both pretty good games, right? So no matter what, you look at it this way. So do you go up against Cat, a guy who he's dominated? And yeah, Cat is going to have an advantage because he played. But then the next night, you go up against the Twin Towers against Cleveland. So it's still kind of crazy, right? So, I mean, this is a crazy stretch. They're going to go up against the Knicks. We're bypassing these next 3 games. You can go up against the Knicks, then you have Cleveland, and then you go to Orlando against those young guys, and then you have Miami. So, with Bam, athletic. So, I just feel like right now, if you're Nick Nurse and you're the 76ers, you're like, bruh, I'm sorry, but Paul George had to come back against the Phoenix Suns. You got to come back against the Knicks.
And I think it's an interesting take you have there too, because when you look at it for Joel Embiid, not only are you looking to get him back as soon as possible with the suspension, but If he doesn't come back and all of a sudden you're waiting to have him active for games so he can serve that suspension, then how does the NBA look at it? Because they've already had an investigation of Nick Nurse making claims of not talking about Joel Embiid, and that was an issue for them to get fined. So when does the NBA step in and says, okay, well, he's progressing, now he has a suspension, but you're kind of withholding it, you're pushing it back, doesn't play those games. I just don't see in any type of world where that ends up good for the Philadelphia 76ers. They have 1 win and 2 NBA investigations. It is time to stop it, please. I cannot take it anymore. So I think that's what you have to do. And you don't want to rush the guy, but at the same time, you can use these 3 games to get him better before the NBA once again has to step in and say, all right, guys, what's going on here? Because you can't keep pushing this back.
Exactly. And let's keep it real too. Another thing is you can't keep pushing it back. But if you're saying that Joel Embiid, I talked to Nick Nurse on Sunday. Yeah. He said to me, ideally, we hope to have him back. That's the plan, to have him back this week, right, on this road trip. That's what they wanted, right? They said everything is going to plan. Now, we witnessed them go up against, before they played on Monday, they had the easiest schedule in the NBA, and they were 1-4. So now they're playing these elite teams, and you're going to tell me you're going to keep Joel out? Unfortunately for them, if they had to do it all over again, I think they would have hoped that Joel came back sooner, and that way he could have warmed up against these teams. But now it's about to get real, and they need him. They really need him. So, like you said, if he doesn't play, then the league is going to look at it. But if he doesn't play, that's going to hurt the Sixers from a competitive standpoint, because it goes from 3 games to actually 4, 5, maybe 6. So, you gotta just say, bro, you got to come back and play real rap.
And it's really crazy to think that this early in the season, we're saying you have to come back and play, but it happens to be now that the NBA is involved, now that you have the suspension, that adds a whole nother layer to everything. When you're having reports come out that he could possibly come back against the Clippers as early as that game or against the Lakers, you can't keep pushing it now till later than that. And I'm not somebody that wants to see Joel Embiid come back hurt. I want him to be 100% healthy before he comes back. But where do you draw the line? Because I would love to say that you could hold him until December, maybe, if he's going to be injured this whole time, but then you're not going to win basketball games, right? You're not going to win against a guy like AD down low. You're not going to win against a guy like Cat down low. You're just not. You are just not. So when you look at it now, it's not only saying, all right, we want him to be healthy. The NBA is going to come in. This is way too much drama. Then you could possibly lose draft picks if there's more investigations. It's just too much. This needs to happen. We need to see him play. So I think, I don't want to say it's a bad thing or a good thing that he got suspended, but I do say that, it gives him more time off. Maybe that's what he needed. And now you look at it and say he can come back. Fingers crossed, he will be 100% healthy.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could be on an NBA matchup. Tonight, the Sixers head west to face the Clippers, and the spread is teeny tiny. FanDuel has the Clippers favored by just 1.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Denver Nuggets are set to miss Aaron Gordon for at least multiple weeks.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast.
Y'all, let's get straight into it. So Aaron Gordon yesterday, he suffered a calf injury per Shams, and basically he looked like he was dealing with the injuries for the last several weeks. And he's been dealing with stuff seemingly from the offseason. And Aaron Gordon yesterday, I don't know if you all remember, but there was a play where he got a charge called on him. He tried to sidestep, and he apparently over the course of that play, landed wrong and injured himself slightly and then went out of the game. Now, the Denver Nuggets, they're sitting at 4-3 currently on the year. Aaron Gordon has been pivotal for this team. He's averaging 15.7 rebounds and 3 assists. He's been shooting 55% from the three-point line so far this year while being a very consistent player for them and obviously their most important defender on the roster. Aaron Gordon has been spectacular, including the Wolves game where he had 31, I want to say, and 11, made a bunch of three-pointers. And so this is obviously going to be a big blow to the team because AG, in many ways, he's the heart of the Denver Nuggets. Aaron Gordon hustles. He makes the three-man game work with Jamal Murray. He is the ultimate team player. He buys into the identity. He really supports what Nikola Jokic is doing. He plays backup 5. He's developed into a legitimate floor spacer this year. So AG obviously is going to be a player that is missed, and I don't want to understate that. Aaron Gordon's a very important player for this team and for this franchise. Now, the good news, Aaron Gordon being out for this time frame this early in the season is manageable. And the reason that I say that is even though they have a rather difficult set of games coming up, they got the Thunder tomorrow. They play versus the Mavericks this week. They play versus the Miami Heats this week. They're definitely going to have to figure out some ways to survive without him. But the good news is that because it's so early, this is something that they can catch right now before they get into the nitty-gritty of the season, before you really got to start pushing for wins. They can kind of deal with this as of right now. And as we get further into the show, we're going to talk about some replacement options. But Aaron Gordon is obviously just a huge part of what this team is trying to do overall. And they're really just going to have to find ways to manage without him. And, you know, what AG's been able to offer this year, especially while Jamal has been finding his groove, I'll say that. AG has just been a consistent and constant for them in the lineup that just allows for them to be able to do a lot of different things. And so Aaron Gordon, you know, he just signed a 4-year deal. He's obviously a player that the Denver Nuggets highly value. He took a $17 million pay cut to stay with this team. He has done anything and everything asked of him in order to make this team better. And obviously the team appreciates that, and they know that. Again, AG this year, 15.4, 6.7, 3 assists a game, a steal a game, and he's averaging 30 minutes per game. Obviously, went out yesterday early, 53% from the field, 54.5% from 3, 84.6% from the line, and a 66.3 true shooting. I mean, that's a big deal. You know, to be getting that kind of production out of a player that gives you that much versatility is a really big deal not to have him in the roster. And so obviously don't want to downplay that at all. That's something that they're going to miss irrevocably. It's not even a question. But I do think that the good news is that because of the way that the team has been built, they're going to have an opportunity to really pour in to what they want their identity to be and figuring out who on this roster is ready, who on this roster is ready to step up and to take care of business and to do this job. Now, AG, you know, there's just a lot of intangibles that he has. And so even if you noticed the game yesterday versus the Toronto Raptors, you know, Michael Porter Jr. made some really good plays down the stretch of that game, but MPJ got lost on a lot of back screens yesterday. And Hunter Tyson, as good as he is at different points, he also lost some stuff defensively. And so when you're looking at the roster and you see Julian Strawther kind of getting beat off the dribble, he's still figuring out how to be a POA defender in this league. He will get better. Aaron Gordon makes up for a lot of that, even for Jokic's defense yesterday, which was not great for a majority of the game until the end of the game. And I wouldn't even say not just not great, but not good. And Aaron Gordon is able to be a backline protector versus a lot of that stuff. And even in the comeback yesterday, you could just see there were just points in time in the game where they really needed him to be on the court. But again, you go back to the Minnesota Timberwolves game. You go back to the Brooklyn Nets game. You go back to even the OKC Thunder game they played originally. He just has such a big responsibility. And because Aaron Gordon has developed like legitimately as a floor spacer this year, that's just going to change the fulcrum for how the team is laid out, and they're going to have to find some really creative new ways. And again, this is going to be a big task to fill for the players that we're going to talk about on the other side. But I do think for AG has just been such a consistent solvent for them. So I'm actually really curious to see how Nikola Jokic is going to be able to utilize this. And so what they can do is they're probably going to have Michael Porter Jr. playing a lot more for. Michael Porter Jr. is going to have to be a much bigger rebound. Now, he's already rebounding well. He's averaging 7 a game. But they need him to step up his rebounding in total, and I think they're going to be able to play around with some different lineups where they're going to be able to put him at the 4, increase their floor spacing. But on the defensive end and on the rebounding end, that's where Michael Porter Jr. is going to have to be able to step up and do more. Now, granted, he is doing that. He had 19 and 9 and 3 assists yesterday. He played really well down the stretch. But I do think that this is going to be a fun opportunity for him to be able to utilize his game even more. Now, obviously, Aaron Gordon being out is one thing, but then Jamal Murray's in concussion protocol. And as of right now, he has not been cleared to resume basketball activities. So that's really where a lot of the stress is going to come from. They're already inserting Russell Westbrook into the lineup. Aaron Gordon at the small ball 5, but also as the 4, that it gives you in some ways, a defensively slanted lineup around Jokic and around Michael Porter Jr., which allows for them to do some different things with the lineup. So if you ask me in terms of like my panic meter, you said swipe, but like, how are you actually feeling about this? Are you concerned about the long-term effects from this? I would say that the panic is at about a 2 or 3, but because they caught it so soon. But again, calf injuries can be tricky. Now, this is not doom and gloom. There's no report of anything else, but calf injuries, just because of the way the muscle is situated and especially what it's connected to, you just want to be really careful to make sure you're not putting a lot of tension onto your lower body and your lower extremities when you're trying to deal with an injury like this. And so I do think that taking this smart approach, taking a couple weeks off for Aaron Gordon and then allowing for him to get healthy, that stuff is really going to aid the overall roster. And like I said, what they do have a lot of is they have a lot of like bigger wings, I would say, that can kind of slot in this role. Now, the degrees to which they'll be effective is going to vary. But in particular for Michael Porter Jr., this is going to be kind of his spot that he's going to have to take the bigger load over. And I would also say I think Michael Porter Jr., he's gotten away with not always being as locked in defensively as he needs to. Now, he's had some really high peaks like the 23 playoffs. Yesterday wasn't so great. On the year, I think he's had some overall good performances relative to like who he is, but Porter's going to have to step up on that end, and that defense, it's just going to have to get more consistent from him. And the Nuggets and Michael Malone, they're just going to have to be a little bit more willing to experiment and try some things.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could be on an NBA matchup. Tonight, the Sixers head west to face the Clippers, and the spread is teeny tiny. FanDuel has the Clippers favored by just 1.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The worst performance of the season last night for the Charlotte Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast.
It hits you this time. It's the most dejected I think that our fan base has been since the start of the season, because that was a bad one. We'll get to it in a moment, but you can see Doug. He's pouting on the microphone. He's more depressed on the microphone. You can see him and read his content on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. I'm still not done. Still got to give some shout outs. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Hornets daily newsletter. One stop for the ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. Also, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game time?
Yeah, sad game time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The Hornets, they lose last night, 114-93. They fall to 2-5 on the season after last night's loss to Minnesota. The starters were Brandon Miller. Great. He suited up after being questionable with the glute strain and injury management. Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball. Josh Green was back out there. Played decent amount more minutes, 26 minutes for him. That's great. And then we go to the center position, Doug. And, well, we see Taj Gibson starting. No Nick Richards. No Mark Williams. You're having to go to Tijan Salon and Grant Williams and Moussa Diabate, who played 11 minutes last night, playing the front court. And, well, I guess that's how it goes down with Rudy Gobert. Not even destroying you, honestly, it offensively, like I thought. There were some dominant moments for him, but it was really the bench for Minnesota. Naz Reid, 25 points. Dante DiVincenzo had a couple of tough buckets. One in particular scored 14, and it was the bench, and it was just the size, and it was the lack of offense for the Hornets as to why they fell so poorly. Bad performance all around. The worst one, I think, on the young season.
So, look, this was always going to be a difficult game without two centers because it was less about Rudy Gobert dominating or not dominating and more about the strength and the size of Minnesota and their ability to get to the rim, particularly Anthony Edwards. But then, of course, Naz Reid did a little bit of work inside, but most of it was 5 of 7 from 3, came down to some defensive mistakes up top, whether it was LaMelo and Cody Martin miscommunicating, or LaMelo and Miles miscommunicating, or just something. Or one was LaMelo and Tijan on a switch, and nobody goes to. It was a screen the screener kind of play where Rudy Gobert ends up screening LaMelo out of the play, and Naz Reid hits the 3. So there were all kinds of issues across the floor defensively for the Charlotte Hornets, and I think that's expected. Again, when you have no one that's any kind of threat near the basket, which Mark Williams would have been, which Nick Richards to a certain extent would have been, then you're going to have issues. I think the more frustrating thing for me watching this game was some of the offensive issues that this team had, whether it was turnovers to be 2 straight turnovers to begin the second quarter by LaMelo Ball, or whether it was when LaMelo Ball was off the floor, the inability for the Charlotte Hornets to move the basketball effectively. I mean, so many possessions ended up with like passes going nowhere, just around the perimeter, not enough paint touches, guys not knowing where the ball is supposed to go. I think some of that is Brandon Miller kind of getting back into, off of this injury and back into the groove where he can take more command of the offense. Part of it is Vasa Micic chewing gum on the sideline in a t-shirt and not in a jersey because he came into this season not ready to play. I mean, there's just before we even get into the LaMelo stuff, the fouling at the end of the third quarter, the miserable end of that third quarter, we will get to it. But there are issues that extend far beyond LaMelo Ball. And the reason I'm dejected, Walker, is because I can't believe we're back here. I can't believe we're still here with no centers, no backup point guards, fundamental issues due to injuries, but also due to just guys not knowing how to play defense. It's not that they're not trying hard. It's that there's just a lot of guys making mistakes out there on the defensive end of the floor. And it's just like, this goes back to Borrego, man. I just can't believe we're back here.
So I think, allow me to serve as this beacon of hope, because what happens is we can go through the last few games and see that the Hornets played a team that won the NBA championship twice and a team that got to the Western Conference Finals last year. Even if it's a new look team, this was a really difficult portion of the schedule where you're taking on 2 teams in 3 games that were among the 4 best teams in all of the NBA. This is why I went out on a radio limb and said that the Raptors game was a must-win, because I did not feel great about the chances for Charlotte to
get that victory. In retrospect, you were right.
I didn't feel great about the Hornets' chances of getting the win against Boston. I thought maybe we could be competitive, and you want to be competitive in every one of these games, and they were against Boston in a couple of those outings. It got away late. We know the reps. We've already done that show. Minnesota didn't have a shot. You thought this would get ugly. I thought this would get ugly. I mean, we prefaced this in our preview yesterday when we said, yeah, man, when you don't have size, when you don't have a center that you can depend on, it could get ugly against that squad where Julius Randle is just a bulldog doing whatever he wants. Anthony Edwards, also the same thing. They bring a type of mentality. Oh, yeah, and then they have this defensive player of the year multiple time kind of guy in Rudy Gobert. So I don't know how much we learned about the Hornets and what is a trend in just such a 6, 7, 8 game sample size and that 3 game specific stretch for this squad. There are some things that are concerning, but we know that Brandon Miller is also coming back from injury. How much of a rhythm can he get coming back from injury? I think that allows LaMelo to play make more, where Brandon is just going to be set up and hitting more shots. Miles Bridges, is this real? Because he's been struggling. And also, they got to get some center, whether it's Nick Richards back or Mark Williams at some point back. I just think before it's all the way doomed, no doubt, bad performance offensively. It was not only of the Hornets season, but it was one of the least, maybe the least efficient performance offensively from any team in the NBA this year, according to Cleaning the Glass. They were in the first percentile in points per possession last night of all games played so far. So, look, it was terrible. I just don't know how much of this we can take away and then paste it. This is what we're going to see going forward. We're back again, right? Like, I just don't know if that's okay to say that we're back here again.
Well, I don't want to go back. Okay.
No, I know
we're not going back. Okay. I don't want to go back.
Nice fitting for today.
But the thing is, I'm not doom and gloom. I'm just frustrated that we're dealing with, because again, I understand the fundamental issues of this game, not having Mark Williams and Nick Richards, but that doesn't excuse some of the other issues on this team, including Miles Bridges, who had a good game defensively, keeping Randle away from his spots. And he had, I think, more than 5 assists in this game. He was doing good things, but he can't hit the ocean. I mean, his three-point shot is missing. It's not just missing. It's missing terribly. It pains me to watch him shoot the basketball. And that's a problem because they paid him a lot of money to come in and maybe not be a 20-point-per-game scorer like he was last season, but not 4 of 13 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, and just awful offensively. Trey Mann, God love him, he is hitting difficult shots. He is an extremely great shot maker. He's being put in a position to make plays when LaMelo Ball is off the floor, and he can't do it. And then when LaMelo Ball is on the floor, particularly when he's on the floor with the bench, he is absolutely pressing. I don't know if it was the early Brandon Miller injury. Just something seems to have clicked in his head where he's like, I got to do everything. And he's turning the basketball over. He's making horrible decisions in terms of fouling. The end of that third quarter where they actually made a run. They made 2 runs in the third quarter. And the one at the end was led by LaMelo, who put his head down, finally stopped taking these low-quality, quick three-point shots that were killing the offensive rhythm. He put his head down, got to the free throw line, and everything was looking good. And then 30 seconds left in the quarter, he throws up an awful deep three-point attempt. It was short. Then he tries to go after it. Of course, he gets called for the loose ball foul. That was foul number 2. And then 8 seconds left, LaMelo misses the catch-and-shoot 3. DiVincenzo gets it in transition. And in the bonus, he takes a transition take foul with 8 seconds to go in the third quarter. I wrote in my notes, what in the absolute world was he thinking? And that's your best player. When your best player is making those kinds of plays to end of third quarter, I might as well have written in my game notes, game over.